Welcome back to CIA Declassified. Dark, frigid winds whip through the open door of a blackened transport plane, thousands of feet above the silent occupied forest of Lithuania. You are standing in the jump bay, the air tasting of oil and thin mountain oxygen. Below you, the Iron Curtain isn't a wall of steel, but a vast dark expanse of territory where the NKVD patrols every road. You are an exile, a man without a country, carrying nothing but a false identity, a shortwave radio, and a lethal set of skills provided by the Americans. The green light flickers on, casting a sickly glow over the faces of your team. Men who were farmers and students months ago, now transformed into the vanguard of a secret war. You find yourself standing on the edge of the future inside a briefing room in Frankfurt. The space is cramped, the walls closing in with the weight of topographical maps and the heavy scent of tobacco and stale coffee. Around you, officers in pressed olive drabs lean over dossiers of displaced persons, their eyes searching for the specific psychological resilience required to survive behind Soviet lines. These aren't just refugees, they are the stay-behind assets, the human neurons of a resistance network designed to be activated the moment the Cold War turns hot. You can feel the hum of the mission and the weight of the secret that the United States is training a ghost army to haunt the Soviet interior. Imagine a tactile reality of the preparation. The weight of a Soviet-made TT-33 pistol tucked into a waistband, the scratchy wool of a local peasant's coat, and the bitter taste of a cyanide L pill hidden in a fake tooth. You are watching an instructor demonstrate the assembly of a clandestine radio in total darkness, knowing that a single misplaced wire could mean a one-way trip to the gulag. The atmosphere in the training center is a pressurized mixture of patriotic fervor and fear as the team realizes they are being prepared to jump into a void where no rescue is coming. Outside, the cold mist of a Bavarian morning clings to the corrugated steel of the training huts. You are part of the team monitoring the final field exercise, eyes straining through binoculars as exiles practice the art of blind drops, landing in territory where no reception committee awaits. There is a profound sense of playing with lives in the room, a silent acknowledgement that if this succeeds, these men will be the first to die in a liberation effort that hasn't even been officially declared. You aren't just training soldiers, you are weaving a human shroud across Eastern Europe, creating a permanent artificial resistance that will ensure the West has eyes and ears behind the curtain. As the static line jerks and the exile disappears into the night, you perceive the staggering momentum of a project that intends to turn the Soviet near aboard into a landscape of constant sabotage. The risk is immense, an overwhelming flood of betrayal and counterintelligence rising as the agents touch down. You aren't just an architect of a paramilitary program, you are building a bastion in the shadows that intends to catch every whisper of Soviet troop movement. The setting is one of tactical excellence masking total strategic manipulation, where the private dreams of liberation are siphoned into the sifting algorithms of a ghost in the paramilitary state. Why AEREADY? The designation follows the CIA's internal cryptonym system of the era. The AE diagraph was the specific geographic indicator for operations concerning the Soviet Union and its satellite states. The suffix ready was chosen to reflect the stay-behind nature of the mission, signifying a force that was to remain in a constant state of readiness for activation upon a hot war outbreak or a popular uprising. It was a literal command, a force that was AE, Soviet-focused, and ready, poised for immediate action. To understand how the CIA planned to play a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek with 500 million rubles and a few hundred parachutes, we have to look at the cold, hard receipts of this paramilitary gamble. AEREADY utilized the Office of Policy Coordination for its initial paramilitary funding. Training was largely conducted at Camp King in Oberursel, Oberusel, in West Germany. Agents were taught the S-Plan, a method for establishing secure communication lines using dead drops. The program prioritized the recruitment of exiles from the Baltic states, Ukraine, and Poland. Infiltrations were often carried out using unmarked C-47 aircraft flying at low altitudes to avoid radar. Many agents were equipped with one-time pads for unbreakable encrypted radio communication. AEREADY cooperated with the Galen organization, the West German intelligence service. The program utilized blind drops where agents had no local contact upon landing. Parachutes used were often made of dark silk to minimize visibility during night descents. The Soviet Union successfully infiltrated the program early on through the use of double agents. The Kim Philby leaks are believed to have compromised several AE-ready drop zones. Agents were provided with identity kits, including weathered Soviet work permits and ration cards. The program included training in the use of high explosive plastic for sabotage of rail lines. AE-ready agents were often tasked with identifying potential landing strips for future Allied forces. The CIA utilized front organizations to provide stipends to the families of exiles during the training. Psychological screening included the stress test of mock interrogations by officers posing as Soviet guards. Shortwave radios were often disguised as common household items like sewing kits or clocks. The program spent millions of dollars on black currency, Soviet rubles obtained through clandestine channels. In 1952, the program shifted focus toward intelligence collection rather than direct action due to high casualty rates. Some agents lived under deep cover for over 3 years before being extracted or captured. The Red Sox program was a closely related sibling operation to AE-ready. I also have an episode on that. Infiltrators used burp guns like the PPSH-41 to blend in with local equipment. The program utilized homing beacons that could be activated by agents to hide in supply drops. The Forest brothers in the Baltics were a primary target for AE-ready support. Clandestine boat landings were attempted in the Black Sea as part of the program's Southern Tier. Agents were taught to live off the land using survival techniques tailored to the Siberian and Baltic winters. The program utilized micro cameras for photographing sensitive Soviet documents. AE-ready influenced the early structure of the U.S. Army Special Forces. Many agents were recruited directly from the labor service units in occupied Germany. The program maintained a lost agent file that grew to include hundreds of names by 1955. Infiltrators often carried a poison pill to avoid interrogation under torture. AE-ready utilized safe houses across the border in neutral countries like Finland. The program's effectiveness was crippled by the Stasi and the KGB. Some exiles were trained in psychological warfare, including the distribution of anti-Soviet pamphlets. The program utilized aerial reconnaissance to select drop zones with minimal Soviet troop density. Agents were trained in social engineering to infiltrate local Soviet administrative offices. AE-ready used invisible ink for messages sent through the regular Soviet mail system. The program provided training in hand-to-hand combat techniques derived from OSS manuals. Clandestine radio stations like Radio Liberty were used to send coded signals to agents. The program utilized high-altitude balloons for dropping propaganda materials over major cities. AE-ready was part of a larger umbrella of National Security Council Directive 10-2. Many agents found that the resistance groups they were sent to help were actually Soviet traps. The program utilized biometric data, fingerprints, and dental records to identify returning agents. AE-ready agents were instrumental in mapping the inner German border before the wall was built. The program attempted to establish a secret government in exile within occupied territory. Some agents were extracted using the Fulton surface-to-air recovery system. That's the Skyhook. I also have an episode on that. The program utilized night vision optics, primitive sniper scope technology in its later stages. AE-ready recruited former Soviet officers who had defected to the West. The program's failure in the mid-50s led to the New Look policy of containment rather than rollback. Several AE-ready stay-behind caches of weapons were discovered as late as the 1990s. The program utilized holographic seals on forged documents to deter Soviet detection. Agents were often debriefed in safe zones in the Alps after successful extraction. AEREADY influenced the creation of the stay-behind networks in Western Europe. The program utilized microfilm for the transport of entire training manuals into the field. The program was officially phased out as the CIA moved toward technological signals intelligence. Quote from a declassified internal CIA memo on paramilitary training for AEREADY. We are not just training spies, we are preparing for the liberation of half of a continent. Quote from a declassified program memo. The Exile is our most potent weapon because he has everything to gain and nothing but his life to lose. Quote from declassified operational directive for infiltration teams. A drop behind the lines is a death sentence if the local population has been successfully pacified by the NKVD. Quote from a declassified memo from a retired CIA clandestine service officer, but there's no name provided. Our goal is to create a sleeper resistance that can turn every Soviet bridge into a funeral pyre. Quote from a declassified intelligence assessment. The moral cost of sending these men into certain capture is the heaviest burden of the Cold War. Declassified CIA Directorate of Plans briefing. We must assume every drop zone is compromised until the agent establishes his all is well signal. And a quote from an internal report on the Kim Philliby compromise. The program is a failure not because of our agents, but because of the leak in London, end quote. When the AEREADY files were partially declassified, the most sensitive sections were found in Volume 4, titled Liquidations and High-Value Target Extractions. This section contains approximately 212 pages of total sanitization. The redactions fall under Exemption B1, and they're massive, specifically concerning asset names in sovereign governments. I suspect these missing pages discuss the successful infiltration of agents who reached high-ranking positions within the Soviet satellite states and remained active for decades. Furthermore, the redactions in the unconventional neutralization section suggest the program researched the targeted assassination of Soviet nuclear scientists, a technology and policy that remains highly classified. It suggested that these pages detail a plan to use AEREADY agents to sabotage from the top by poisoning the leadership of the East German state during a planned 1953 uprising. When you train men to be ghosts, the world begins to wonder whose side they are really on. So there's quite a few theories here, such as the double-cross conspiracy. This one suggests that AEREADY was actually a sacrificial program. Proponents argue the CIA intentionally leaked drop zones to the Soviets to flood their counterintelligence with low-level targets, allowing more sensitive, higher-level spies to operate unnoticed. Then there's the Lost Army of the Mountains theory. It's a fringe one that posits that a large team of AEREADY exiles were dropped deep in the Ural Mountains to find a hidden Soviet research city, and that they succeeded living in secret within the Soviet interior for 40 years without ever being caught. Then there's the Manchurian exile theory. Some believe the program used early behavioral conditioning to ensure exiles would commit suicide or turn on their teammates if they were captured, preventing any brainwashing by the KGB from being effective. And there is the false flag theory. It's a theory that suggests that the 1956 Hungarian Revolution was prematurely triggered by AEREADY agents acting against orders, forcing the West to choose between a nuclear war and abandoning the exiles they had trained. Was AEREADY a success? Tactically, it was a brutal tragedy. The project successfully identified and trained hundreds of brave men, but the vast majority were captured or killed shortly after landing. The reality was the Soviet counterintelligence was far more pervasive and effective than the Americans had thought. The reliance on blind drops proved fatal in an environment where the state controlled every movement. However, it birthed the modern unconventional warfare doctrines, such as the failures of AEREADY forcing the CIA and the military to rethink how they supported resistance movements. It led to the development of the operational security protocols that are still used by special forces today. The project essentially provided the blood-written manual for how not to conduct an infiltration, saving countless lives in later conflicts by highlighting the necessity of deep cover vetting and sanitized communication lines. Strategically, it was a long-term deterrent. While the individual missions failed, the existence of the program forced the Soviet Union to divert massive resources towards internal security. The fear of a stay-behind army kept the KGB focused inward, potentially slowing Soviet expansion elsewhere. The program also acted as a foundation for the stay-behind networks of NATO. By training exiles, the U.S. mastered the logistics of clandestine supply and command and control that would later be used to secure Western Europe against a potential Soviet invasion. It proved that a nation could maintain a government in waiting through its diaspora. While the liberation of Eastern Europe didn't happen in the 1950s, the psychological groundwork laid by AEREADY contributed to the eventual internal collapse of the Soviet bloc by proving the West would never truly accept the status quo. As far as operational and technological breakthroughs go, AEREADY led to quite a few, such as clandestine communications hardening, which was the core of AEREADY. Today, this has evolved into the end-to-end encryption used in modern messaging apps like Signal or WhatsApp. For humanity, this technology allows for private, secure conversations in an era of mass data collection. In the intelligence community, it is the basis for burst transmissions that allow field agents to send encrypted data in milliseconds, minimizing the window for signal detection. The military employs this breakthrough for low probability of intercept LPI radios that use spread spectrum technology to hide military communications within the ambient background noise of the battlefield. Psychological resilience vetting was birthed by the necessity of selecting exiles who wouldn't break under Soviet interrogation. No small feat, if you're unaware. Today, this technology is utilized in the high-stakes selection process for commercial pilots, emergency surgeons, and astronauts. For humanity, it ensures that the people in control of critical infrastructure are cognitively prepared for extreme stress. In the military and intelligence sphere, it has evolved into SIR, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training, which is a requirement for all high-risk personnel. This same vetting allows the intelligence community to identify deep cover assets whose personality profiles are uniquely suited for long-term isolation in hostile environments without going native or suffering a mental breakdown. Unconventional infiltration were refined through the blind drop failures of the 1950s, as far as logistics go. Today, for humanity, this technology is seen in the autonomous delivery drones used for humanitarian aid in war zones and the disaster relief logistics that map the last mile delivery and destroyed environments. It allows for the precision delivery of life-saving supplies without the need for a functioning airport. In the military sphere, this has evolved into the HALO, high altitude, low opening parachute techniques, and the use of stealth transport aircraft like the MC-130. These systems allow for the covert insertion of special operations teams into denied territory with surgical precision, ensuring they can bypass modern integrated air defense systems. And social network analysis began with the search for exiles and displaced person camps. Today, for humanity, this technology is the foundation of the algorithms used to match specialized talent with global opportunities. It allows for the identification of influencers and key nodes within any community. In the intelligence community, it has evolved into human network analysis used to map the hierarchy of hostile political factions. The military utilizes this to identify the human terrain of an occupied area, allowing them to distinguish between potential allies and insurgent threats by analyzing the social and tribal connections of the local population. We stand today at the far side of a history that was written in the blood of the exiles, where the exile's edge was often a double-edged sword. This endeavor was the ultimate paramilitary gamble of the Cold War, a human shroud woven by the CIA to pierce the darkness of the Soviet interior. It remains a staggering reminder that the Iron Curtain was not just a geographic boundary, but a psychological one, where the price of entry was the total erasure of one's past. The program didn't just drop agents, it reflected the absolute desperation of an era that believed a secret army was the only way to save a world in chains. The operational reality of the stay-behind networks has settled into the very architecture of our modern security state, turning the concept of resistance into a managed science. We no longer see the blackened transport planes, but we live within the precision of the encryption and vetting models they necessitated. A digital fingerprint of a time when a man's loyalty was his only currency. This project proved that for the state, the human heart was just another battlefield, and the true prize was the ability to manufacture a patriot in a training camp. Every successful transmission from behind the line was a victory for freedom, but it was purchased with a legacy of betrayal and lost agents that we are still sifting through today. The reality of AEREADY is that it turned the geography of the Soviet bloc into a complex grid of human variables where every drop zone was a test of the agency's ability to predict the unpredictable. By turning the trauma of the displaced into the fuel for clandestine infiltration, the program created a precedent where the individual's identity became a secondary priority to the strategic necessity of the stay-behind network. This era of shadow work established that the true map of power isn't drawn in borders, but in the clandestine radio pings and the cold weather survival of men who lived as ghosts in their own homelands. We are the inheritors of this invisible architecture, living in a world where the security of the state is still anchored by the quiet sacrificial readiness of those we choose to forget. The ability to craft a resistance from the wreckage of a displaced population remains a pinnacle of mid-century shadow work, turning the despair of exile into a tool for national defense. AEREADY provided the blueprint for the modern special operations era, ensuring that the shadows are never truly empty and that no regime is ever beyond the reach of a well-trained infiltrator. This blueprint is now being used to construct even more advanced systems that seek to map and manage the very fabric of human global descent. When the borders close, the ghost is your only messenger. Loyalty is a resource that must be cultivated long before the crisis. You cannot ignite a revolution from the air without a fire on the ground. And remember, the most dangerous soldier is the one who has already lost everything. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we're going to be examining Drifting Deadline, a specialized malware dropper designed to deliver lethal payloads to target machines at a preset, inevitable time. We'll look at the logic bomb architecture, the psychological toil of the digital ticking clock, and the evolution of cyber sabotage that turns the very tools of our lives into a time delay for disaster. Join us next time for the ticking code. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.